Greetings viewers, and you find me at the wheel of a bit of an anomaly in the Indian auto industry. It's called the Mercedes-Benz E-Class All-Terrain and it's a station wagon. Now we've had estates in India in the past, but the thing is, they had their time in the sun and then they died out. It's a shame. Now, however, luxury car makers seem to be bringing them back, and this E-Class All-Terrain is a good example of how they're doing that. To sweeten the deal and make them a little bit more appealing, they're adding things like a rugged touch. This all-terrain version, for instance, it has rugged bits on the outside, a rugged grille, rugged cladding, it's got larger wheels, it's got air suspension so you can raise the ride height, and it's got 4MATIC all-wheel drive. So, a bit more than your average E-Class sedan then. And personally, I'm very glad about this because I love estate cars and I love these rugged estate cars as well. They're just so appealing to me because they do enough of the rough stuff, but they're still superb luxury cars at the end of the day. They pamper you, they're well equipped, and you wouldn't mind turning up to a 5-star hotel in any one of them. I think it's the fact that they're the sort of underdog's choice, the rarity, the left field approach that I like them so much. So it's clear that it's got the look right and there is a certain appeal to it. What I'm here to find out today is if it can deliver on that appeal. So just what makes this E-Class All-Terrain tick then? Well, for starters, it's an E220D, and if that sounds familiar, it is the same engine you get in the E-Class sedan. However, in the sedan, that engine is BS4 compliant, while here, this is the first of its kind in India to be a BS6 compliant 4-cylinder diesel engine. It's the same motor we recently saw in the facelifted C-Class, and it will be introduced in the sedan version of the E-Class by the end of the year. Now, despite all the modifications to make it BS6 compliant, it still puts out the same 194 horsepower and 400 Newton meters as the E-Class sedan. And it's also still mated to this wonderful 9-speed automatic. We really like it. For instance, if this motor does have any turbo lag, it's really hard to tell because the gearbox is so on top of it. It just shifts its way around the turbo lag and keeps you in the meat of the power band. It's got a nice strong pull right from low down. Like I said, the gearbox takes care of a lot of this engine's shortcomings. It just works its way around them. And what you get is a nice strong uninterrupted pull. It makes getting this car moving very, very easy. Now, unlike the E220D sedan, this one has air suspension and all-wheel drive. So how has that affected the dynamics? The steering still feels really quick and nice. Now remember, this is the shorter wheelbase E-Class, so it does feel slightly tidier than the long wheelbase car, but it's still a pretty big car. Now, because it's air suspension, it gives you a wonderfully comfy ride in comfort mode and that slightly floaty feeling at high speeds, and that's okay. However, it does feel a little bit jittery at low speeds and over bumps. It does pitter-patter, and that also might have a little something to do with the 19-inch alloy wheels that this car rides on. The advantage of air suspension, of course, is that you can raise the ride height, and that truly gives it a bit of soft-roading capability, if not all-out off-roading capability. It means you can traverse a dirt track with a little bit more peace of mind. However, even at its highest suspension setting, this car never feels any different from a sedan to drive. It doesn't feel like you're sitting any higher or in a crossover-like position. It just feels quite like a regular E-Class. And the other thing is, the raised ride height only lasts until speeds of 35 kilometers per hour. So the moment you cross that, it lowers down again and becomes a regular E-Class, at least in terms of ride height. There are a lot of things I like about this interior. For one, the quality. It's just superb with very few bits that you could really fault. And just generally, the design of the E-Class cabin was always quite special, and it continues to be so even here. As with the India spec sedan, it still doesn't get the digital dials that you get in Europe. Now I know what you're thinking. You've heard me say this before, right? The same sort of motivational speech about the rugged luxury estate. And you're right, I have done this before. And that's because Mercedes isn't the first company to tackle this formula here in India. Oh no. That'd be Volvo. Now when I said earlier that I really like this sort of car, well, it's this very car, the V90 Cross Country, that wormed its way into my heart. And also like the Mercedes E-Class All-Terrain, this one gets a 2-litre diesel engine, but this one makes quite a bit more power and torque at 235 horsepower and 480 Newton meters. And you can feel that power advantage pretty early on. There's just a much greater reserve of it at your disposal the moment you touch the accelerator pedal. However, the difference is where the Mercedes makes it low down in a strong solid hit, this one eases you into it. It pushes that reserve of power out gently and smoothly. It's there, but it doesn't shout at you about it. What doesn't work in the V90 Cross Country's favor is the gearbox. It's an 8-speed automatic and, well, it's a little bit slow to react to your inputs. So that's the engine, but there is another very crucial mechanical difference between this and the E-Class. Yes, this too has all-wheel drive like the E-Class does, and that does give you a nice reassured feeling when you're going around corners, especially on a wet day like this. But where the E-Class has air suspension at all 4 corners, this one only has air suspension at the rear. And that has its implications. For one, it means that you can't raise the ride height of this car, but that's okay because they've set it to a nice solid SUV rivaling 210 millimeters. That's a lot for an estate car. And the steering, well, is not quite as quick or sharp as the one in the Mercedes, so it doesn't encourage you to chuck this car around as easily, as frequently as that car. The thing about this suspension setup though is even though it doesn't have air suspension at the front and it's riding on 20-inch wheels compared to the Mercedes 19-inch wheels, this feels like the better ride of the two. It's uncanny, I know. They've done a wonderful job of the suspension and it's good at absorbing bumps with only really the stiff stuff making itself felt inside the cabin. Now yes, the E-Class's interior was really special and I did quite like it a lot. But come on, you have to admit this one is really special too. I like the minimalism of everything and how everything is confined to the touchscreen with only the volume controls and some of the audio controls left to physical buttons. However, that does bring up another problem, is that I wish there were a few more buttons sometimes, because when you're on the move, trying to look at the touchscreen and operate it can be a bit of a pain. But where the Volvo once again takes home the championship belt is with the equipment list. This car is really fully loaded. So now that you know what they're like up front, time now to park these two cars up and tell you what things are like in the back seat. It's important to remember that the E-Class All-Terrain is a standard wheelbase E-Class, unlike the sedan. But you'll still agree that knee room is still quite okay. The backrest doesn't recline either and it is a little bit upright, but what you really like is that the seat is really plush and comfortable and thigh support is decent as well. All in all, I think people who are used to luxury cars will be quite okay in the back seat of the E-Class All-Terrain. Now the Volvo too has a very spacious back seat. In fact, I think it might actually have a bit more knee room than the E-Class, but apart from that, it's not all that great. For instance, the backrest again is a bit upright like the Mercs. It also has a high center tunnel like the Mercs, but the cushions on the seats are a tad firm and that could get annoying over a long distance. Overall, I think the Mercedes is the one with the better back seat of the two. These are station wagons too, so we have to talk a bit about the luggage area. On sheer numbers, the Merc trounces the Volvo with 670 litres of cargo volume versus 560. It even has the lower loading lip, so putting in your gear will be easier. However, the big difference is that the Merc's spare tyre will sit on the boot floor, while the Volvo's is stuck nicely into a recess underneath. So in practice, the Volvo's boot is actually more usable. It's no secret that I'm a fan of the V90 Cross Country, but what really proved a surprise was the E-Class All-Terrain. The luxury of the E-Class translates well into a rugged estate, and it's got the better backseat of the two. You also have to applaud Mercedes for making a BS6 compliant diesel engine well before the government set deadline, and one that runs on BS4 fuel. The thing is, since these are lifestyle vehicles, there's a greater chance that they will actually be driven by their owners. And from behind the wheel, you might as well be behind the wheel of an E220D sedan. the all-terrain just doesn't differentiate itself enough. Even the liftable ride height only lasts a short while. The V90 Cross Country on the other hand feels like an altogether different car from the S90 sedan it's based on. The ride height is raised considerably, it gets a more powerful engine and it feels significantly more like a crossover. There are other ways it nips ahead of the Merc too, like having better ride quality and a far longer equipment list. One area of concern might be Volvo's smaller dealer and service network, but that too has grown a lot in recent times. But the real clincher for the V90 Cross Country is the price. At 65.31 lakh rupees ex-showroom, it's a full 10 lakh cheaper than the E-Class all-terrain. And frankly, if you're going to make the left field choice of buying an estate, you're in good hands with the maker of some of the best estates of all time.